different today, okay? So I'm just kind of setting the stage for you to know that. I want us to think a little bit this morning before we jump into the passage. I want you to think in particular, think of a time someone gave you a gift that you know was an act of love. All right? Think of that. Do it right now. Think of a time when someone gave you a gift and you know it was an act of love. Would anybody like to share that? Don't give me the Sunday school answer, Jesus died on the cross for me. I'm looking for human to human. When do you know someone gave you a gift and the only reason they did it was because they loved you? Jen, I see your hand. Go ahead. Do I?
This is about Aiden. He gave me the gift.
Okay.
So,
It's got to be quick, Jen.
we just missed, and I had a bunch of stuff packed away, and it was Christmas time, and he didn't make the Santa thing at school. He went downstairs, went through a jewelry box, and found an old piece of jewelry, wrapped it up, and gave it to me for Christmas.
Nice. Nice. Son gave her an old piece of jewelry. That's cool. That's cool. I saw Lee's hand go up. Yeah, anyone that buys Notre Dame gear truly loves the other person. That is for sure. That is for sure. Absolutely. All right, one more. Tell us quickly. Oh, yeah. Gave her an engagement ring. Good job, Dave. Good job. Hey, you know, if you sit around and think about it, it's a fun thing to do. I challenge you to do it later through the day. I challenge you, those that are watching online, to do this. Sit around today, take some time, and think about, okay, try this. What's the best gift someone has given me that I knew they did that just because they loved me? And there was no other reason that they did it. Yesterday, in thinking about this, I asked Cherry and I asked Caleb, and they each gave some different names of things, and I thought of things that have happened through the years. And one thing that came to our mind, I'll just share quickly with you. I remember when we were adopting Kevin and Juan, we had only intended to adopt one child, and then events changed, and now we were going to adopt two children, and I forgot how to talk there for a minute. And so when that happened, there's all kinds of fees that are related to an international adoption, and we had paid all the fees for one child, and the organization called us back and said, now you're going to have to pay the fees for the second international adoption. And we were like, well, okay, we'll figure it out. And then 24 hours later, they called back and said, hey, just want you to know someone paid all those fees. Yeah, and what an act of love, right? They didn't even know us. They didn't even know who we were. But what an act of love, you know? And if you sit around and you think, you're going to think of things through your life. What makes them valuable is not the value of the gift, right? That may be part of it, but that's not what makes it memorable. That's not what makes it memorable. And the reason I bring that up is because in this passage that we're looking at this morning, someone does an act of love for Jesus that Jesus, I think, implies and says, this is the best thing anyone's ever done for me. This is the best way anyone has ever loved me. Think about that for a moment. Think about what it must have been for Jesus to say, I think this is the best gift anyone's ever given me. That's amazing. That's amazing. Let's look at it together. Now, you got to remember what's going on here. Jesus is a couple of days away from being arrested. I mean, literally like 48 hours. He's about to be arrested and eventually crucified. He knows this is coming. He has told people, especially his disciples, he has told them this is coming. All right? He's tried to warn them of what's getting ready to happen at the week of Passover. And so with that in mind, notice what God's word says in Mark 14. Now the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread, which they're the same thing. Basically, they're synonymous in scriptures, were only 2 days away. And the chief priests and the teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus. They were doing that secretly, obviously, and they had already put it in their mind they were going to kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. Think of the hypocrisy of what's going on here. The religious leaders are preparing for like the ultimate religious festival where they're getting ready to honor God through the Passover, and they're secretly talking about how they can arrest and kill Jesus, but we're going to wait and specifically do it after the Passover because we're afraid people will riot. Think of the hypocrisy of that. But that's what they were doing. It says, while he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. And she broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Now, this is interesting. Mark doesn't tell us the name of the woman. We know from other gospel accounts that this is Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus. For those of you that are familiar with the Bible, you know that Lazarus, Mary, and Martha were all very close to Jesus. They weren't the disciples, they weren't one of the 12, but they were very close to Jesus, some of his closest friends. And so this is Mary that has come. And she does something, first of all, it's a faux pas. She walks into a gathering of men as a woman without food. Because in first century Palestine, women didn't walk into a gathering of men unless they were bringing food. That still happens here in America in the 21st century, doesn't it? Yeah. But back then, that was a serious faux pas. Women, unless they were invited in or unless they were there for a specific serving purpose, they were not supposed to be there. They weren't just to walk in and start doing something. She walked in without food, which is odd. But then she took this jar, we're told it's an alabaster jar of perfume. It was probably, we don't know exactly where it came from, but it was probably an heirloom, something that had been handed down to her. We know that it was of great worth. The reason we know that, you're going to see in the text in just a moment, that one of the disciples complains that this could have been sold up to a year's wages. Let's think about that for just a moment. She's getting ready to give a year's wages in an act of love to Jesus. Let's just wrap our minds around. Let's just pause and think about that for a moment. In New Franklin, a single adult household has a median income of $42,000. I know believers who will not give $42,000 to the Lord in their entire life, much less in one moment. A year's wages in one act of love. That's what she's doing. It says she broke the jar. It implies that this jar and its contents, after she's done, cannot be used for anything else. It's useless. After this one act, it's gone. It will not be able to be used for anything else. And she used it to love Jesus. Notice what the Bible says next. Some of those present were saying indignantly. That word indignantly, it means moral outrage. They are morally offended at what she has just done. When was the last time you were morally offended? I know we get offended because the fast food lady didn't get our order right. I'm not talking about that kind of offense. I'm talking about being morally offended. When have you seen somebody do something and you walked away indignant, upset, because you firmly believe that was wrong? Because that's what that word means. They are morally outraged at this perceived injustice that has happened. And it says they were present, saying indignantly to one another. It's not like they're holding it in. They're talking about it among themselves. I can't believe this just happened. What is wrong with her? How dare her do that? This is wrong. What a waste. That's what they were saying. Why this waste of perfume? Except they were saying it loudly, indignantly, angrily. Why this waste? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. They charged her with a wrongdoing, and then they belittled her for doing it. It would be the equivalent of someone saying to someone else, "You should not have done that. You're dumb for doing it." That's what happened here. And of course, their excuse for this is to say that could have been given to the poor. Now, we don't really know if they had real concerns for the poor or if they had ulterior motives. That, by the way, still happens today. So we don't really know what's going on, but that's what they were saying. Here's what I want us to think about. Their outrage at what this woman has done, this act of love to Jesus, and they just are angry. They're speaking harshly and mean to her because of what she's done. And it boils down to two things. Here it is. One, this is a huge waste. That's part of their argument. Something so valuable, and you've wasted it. But here's the second part. You wasted it on Jesus. And he's not worthy of that. I mean, it's okay to love Jesus, but my God, you're going to love him that way? What's wrong with you? He's not worth it. He's not worth a year's wages. What is wrong with you? That's what's unfolding. I wonder how Jesus felt. I mean, it's never happened to me. I've never had anyone love me, and I mean, I've had a lot of people love me. I've never had anyone do an action of love towards me and then people be upset because they did it. I've never had that happen to me. So I can't relate anything to what Jesus must have been feeling in that moment. First of all, to have someone near him that would love him that much, and at the same time have people near him who would say you're not worth being loved that way. And to think about who those people were. I mean, his disciples. Jesus says, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. There's some things we need to go back and look at in Jesus' words here. First of all, he defends her. He is basically saying her action is not a waste, and by the way, I'm worth it. Only God could say that. I wouldn't suggest you say that to anyone. But he was worth it. And so he declares that. Leave her alone. He says, she has done a beautiful thing. A beautiful thing. So the English language sometimes is very limited in being able to translate a word from the ancient text into English. And this is one of those moments. A word that Jesus used here that has been translated into beautiful. Let me tell you, if you look this word up, this is what it means. Gorgeous, handsome, excellent, outstanding, excellent choice, exceeding expectations, precious, useful, the proper thing, commendable, admirable. That's all packed into beautiful. He's saying, this is the best thing anyone's ever done for me. This is the best choice anyone's ever made in loving me. You've just encountered something amazing. No one's ever loved me this way. And then he says something about the poor, and this verse has been so misinterpreted by so many people. You cannot read the Gospels without seeing that Jesus had a tremendous, tremendous care and respect for the poor. So don't flip this verse and make it say like, well, you don't have to give to the poor because they're always going to be there. You can give to them anytime. That's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, it's always a good time to love me. It's always a good time to love me. And he follows it up by saying, she did what she could. That's an interesting phrase. Let me ask you a question. Just evaluate your own life, your own walk with the Lord. Are you doing what you can? It's a tough question, isn't it? It's a tough question. Because we all look at our lives and realize, well, I mean, I could do more. I could. And all of us, including myself, have our reasons as to why we didn't in the moment that we were in when we could have done more. You see, it's not about the future because the future hasn't happened yet. What I think I can do this afternoon may not even be available this afternoon. But what can I do right now? What can I do in this moment? Because that's really all I have. I can't go back and change yesterday's moments. They're gone. All I have is right now. Am I doing what I could do right now? Because that's all I've got. That's all you have. And Jesus is saying to the disciples, this is what she's done. She's done what she could do in this moment. She did it. It was awesome. It was beautiful. It's the best thing anyone's ever done for me. Leave her alone. He goes on to say, truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. What has she done? Listen, it's not the amount of the gift that mattered, even though it was, even by our terms, an extravagant amount. But that's not what he's talking about. What she did is this. This is what made it so outstanding. In the moment she had, she did what she could, and she seized it, and she did it. And she broke social barriers to do it. She didn't care about the faux pas of what was going on. She didn't go in there. I am absolutely certain she did not walk in there thinking the disciples are going to be outraged with me for doing this. She didn't go in there to tick anybody off. That was not her intent. It wasn't about anyone else in the room but Jesus. For her, that's all it was about. Here, I know where he is. Here's something I can do to love him. I'm going to do it. And she did it. Was it the perfect moment? No. There are no perfect moments to love Jesus. There's only moments that we can make them as perfect as we can. And that's what she did. She took the moment that she had and she made it as perfect as she could make it. And Jesus says it's the best thing anyone's ever done for me. It's beautiful. And he says, everybody's going to know about this. That's not why she did it either. Guarantee you, she was not thinking, I can't wait to do this and to Jesus because he's going to tell everybody about it. She wasn't thinking that way at all. Not at all. It wasn't about being noticed. It was about loving him in the way that she could, in the moment that she had, and she seized it. And Jesus says, great, it's beautiful. But notice what the Bible says. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priest to betray Jesus to them. We don't know why. We don't know why. We don't know what Judas was thinking. I mean, we can draw all kinds of speculations. Truth is, we don't know why he did what he did. But this is what we know. They didn't approach him. He approached them. So in this moment of great love also seems to be the moment that great betrayal was put into motion. Isn't that crazy? That in one moment in time, Jesus could be loved like he's never loved before and hated like he's never been hated at the same time. By one of his closest, one of those closest to him. The Bible goes on to say that after Judas Iscariot went to the chief priest, they were delighted. That word means happy. The Pharisees were happy. They were so happy that they're willing to change their original plan. You remember what the original plan was? We're going to arrest him and we're going to kill him, but we're going to wait till Passover has ended. But Judas comes to them, and whatever conversation they had, they're so happy with it that they're willing to do it now. They're willing to have him arrested and killed immediately. This is the only place in the Bible where we are told that the religious leaders we're happy. That's it. It's the only spot. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money, so he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. As we get ready to close, I want to give you 4 things about expressing love for Jesus that we can maybe glean from this passage. First of all, expressing love for Jesus is never a waste. It's never a waste to love Jesus. Now, here's the real thing, okay? Love is best expressed through some type of sacrifice. Okay? That's how if we're going to measure love, it can be measured a lot of ways. It can be measured by commitment. It could be obviously measured by emotion and the way we feel. But definitely one of the greatest measurements of love is the sacrifice someone is willing to make for another. That becomes kind of like the gold standard for how we love someone. And when you and I love Jesus, when we make a sacrifice to express our love to him, that is never a waste. It's never a waste. Now, it doesn't always feel great because there are things that happen in life that, like in this case, somebody else saw the love and they didn't appreciate it and they let their disapproval be known. Sometimes we make great sacrifices to show our love to Jesus and people get upset. Sometimes, and this is what happens, I believe, to most of us, is that we make a sacrifice to love Jesus and nobody says anything. It's like nobody even noticed I did anything. No thank you, no high five, no pat on the back. No, they didn't get mad, but they didn't even acknowledge it. They did nothing. That's what happens, I believe, to us most of the time. But just because it's not acknowledged, or even if it's ridiculed, it's never a waste. And that's what Jesus was saying in this passage when he defended her. This is not a waste. I'm absolutely worth it. That's what Jesus was saying. I'm absolutely worth it. Don't you dare think that because nobody said thank you that it was a waste. Don't you dare think that because no one acknowledged it, it's a waste. Don't you dare think that someone disapproves of how you did it. I'm worth it. That's what Jesus was saying. You see, we can apply this to a lot of stuff, but like it can be as simple as a song that's sung in a worship service. And the band starts singing, Jason starts leading, and someone thinks, oh, I don't like this song. It's not for you. And he's worth it, even if you don't like it. But that's how we think sometimes. And we can apply that across the board to a lot of things. It's never a waste when we love Jesus. The second thing is that expressing love for Jesus could create outrage from unlikely sources. We see this happen in this passage. It still happens today. I've seen parents get upset when kids say, I think God's calling me into the ministry. I've seen coaches get upset when kids say, I'm going to go on this mission trip and miss practice. I've seen church members get upset with each other because the way someone loved Jesus, well, that's not how I would do it, and I don't really appreciate the way they did it. I've seen husbands and wives get upset with each other because one of them hears from the Lord and wants to do something, and the other's like, but I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. And see, sometimes, thankfully, thank goodness it doesn't happen every time, but sometimes when we express our love for Jesus, someone near, dear, and close to us, someone we respect, someone we hope that will respect us, doesn't. That happens. Expressing love for Jesus, number 3, is as much about opportunity as it is sacrifice. Don't overlook this. This was her moment to love Jesus. She grabbed it. She embraced it. She did what she could in the moment that she had. Yes, it was a sacrifice. That was half of it. But the other half is that she seized the moment. Let me tell you what many of us do, me included in this, is that there are moments I could do something to love Jesus, and I don't because I think I can do it later. I can love him that way later. I can give later. I can participate later. I can make a sacrifice later. I can do this at another time. I don't have to do it right now. And that's the point of what made this beautiful, is that she didn't put it off. She did what she could with what she had in the moment she was in. It wasn't perfect, but by golly, it was beautiful. You and I can do those same things if we seize the moment we have. And last, expressing love for Jesus leaves a legacy for others to follow. Her expression of love has been an example for generations to follow. Generations of people have now read about the way she loved Jesus. And Jesus, it was so important, it was so impressive to him, he made sure that it was in the scriptures for us to know about. Now, she didn't do it for that purpose. Folks, she didn't love Jesus that way to make it into the scriptures. She just loved him. And then as a result, Jesus said, you know what, I'm going to hold that up as an example for other people to follow. And do you know, listen, don't you know that you and I today can love Jesus in such a way, not because we're trying to be an example, not because we're trying to leave a legacy for others to follow. No. We're just loving him in the moment because we can, that becomes an example for others to follow. And thinking about this past week, I think of my parents growing up, okay? They did so many things along the way that left such an impression with me, the way they loved Jesus. And they never sat down and explained to me like, now, we did this so we would be an example to you so that you could follow in our footsteps. No, it was never that way. It was just, we love Jesus. And we're not ashamed to love him in front of you. I remember one of the most memorable things I remember about my dad in particular is that I could get up on any given morning early, go downstairs, and I would find my dad sitting at the kitchen table reading his Bible. It was that simple. Do you know what? I don't ever remember my dad telling me to read my Bible. He didn't have to. I knew it was important to him. That's how he loved Jesus. I remember one time in a church service that our youth, the church that I was a part of at that time, Our youth, our student ministry went on a mission trip to Philadelphia. I was in the 7th grade when that happened, and they went on this mission trip to Philadelphia, and they had a service where the youth came back, much like what Nick and Connor did this morning, just kind of shared with the church body how God spoke to them in that way. And we were in that service. My family was in that service. I did not go on that trip. The reason I did not go is because my parents said, you know what, we're not comfortable with you going to Philadelphia at this age. We don't think this is very safe. We're not going to let you go. And they sat through that service, and we got home, and I'll never forget my dad and my mom sitting down in front of me and saying, with tears, and my dad looked at me and he said, never again will I keep you from going. Never. You will always have the resources. If you want to go, you will be able to go. I will make it happen. Listen, he left a legacy with me. But he wasn't trying to. He wasn't doing it to influence me. He was doing it just to love Jesus. And so this morning, before we leave, I want you to have an opportunity to love Jesus. However you want to. This is the moment you got. It's not perfect, but make it as perfect as you can. And here's what I want to ask you to do. There's a blank piece of paper that was in your chair along with the bulletin. If you're watching online at home, I encourage you to do the same thing. I want you to take this blank piece of paper, and listen, we're done early. I'm done early, but we're not leaving early, okay? So here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. For the next 10, 12 minutes, I want you to sit there and think, what can I do to give a gift to the Lord? Just because I love him. It can be whatever you want it to be. There's no expectation on my part for what you do to express your love to the Lord. Maybe you want to start having a daily devotional time. Maybe you want to give to some organization just out of a love for Jesus. Maybe you want to start serving in some organization because you love Jesus. You're not doing it for me. You're not doing it for Grace Bible Church. You're not doing it for your kids or for your spouse. You're doing it because you love Jesus. Now then, if you're married, you may, depending on what it is, you probably might want to talk to your spouse about it. But that's what this time is for. And then I want you to write that down on that piece of paper, whatever that gift is. Do not put your name on the paper. I don't want your name on the paper. I don't want to know who you are. But I would love to know how we are going to love Jesus. And when you write that on that piece of paper, once you've got it settled, there's string hanging on the wall. There's little clips on the string. I just want you to take that piece of paper and clip it to the string and leave it. I'm going to ask Christy this week to take a picture of those pieces of paper. We'll post them at the Joy at GBC. And we can see together how we're all loving Jesus. In the moments that we have. In the moments this is what I've got. This is the moment I have. I will make it as perfect as I can make it. And you know what? It'll be beautiful. It'll be beautiful. So there's just going to be music playing in the background. You can go ahead and start that. In a few minutes, I'll come back. I'll close our service. You write on your piece of paper, put it on the wall as the Lord leads you. hopefully you have put your beautiful thing up. I'm going to hang mine up in a minute that you've given to the Lord. But as you leave today, I encourage you to walk by and read. Read what people are doing to love the Lord. Folks, it's a beautiful thing to love the Lord. It's not a waste. It's not a waste. So let's love him together the best that we can. Amen? Amen. All right, so this morning, if you're a guest of ours, you're new to Grace, man, we'd love to connect with you. We'd love to carry on this conversation and what it means to love Jesus the best that we can with what we have. And the best way to get connected and to open up a line of communication is to take out your smartphone right now and to text the word CONNECT to 330-400-2869. You do that, that opens up a line of communication, and we'll begin to share with you some of the other things that are happening here at Grace Bible Church. With all that, it's been great being with you this morning. Thank you so much for loving the Lord today and being in this place. Thank you to those online for being a part of this service. So glad you connected. God bless you all. We will see you next Sunday.